Well, good evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. Happy 2026. Hopefully, everyone had a wonderful holiday season. And thank you for joining us tonight for part one of our winter 2026 Amplify DU session. Obviously, this is part one. Next Wednesday will be part two, and I'm super excited to have you all here this evening to talk about successful and easily implemented recruitment tactics as we head into spring recruitment. For the majority of you, congratulations on being in your role as the Vice President of Recruitment. I know as we head into the last half of the fall semester and we go into finals and then there's holiday break, obviously it's a pretty quick and sometimes stressful time when we think about going into spring recruitment. And so trying to provide Amplify as a way for you to get some really good training on thinking about how can we be successful for the spring and not make it feel so overwhelming. And so tonight's session is all about what are top 10, I would say, successful tactics that can be easily implemented so that you feel a little less overwhelmed headed into the spring recruitment season. I'm joined here tonight with the rest of my growth team on the DU staff, and I should probably make an introduction for myself. Most of you probably have seen my name. You've gotten my emails. I'm Hayden Ron, Senior Director of Fraternity Growth for DU. I'm a 2016 grad of our Oregon chapter. I've been back on staff for just over a year. I spent about 6 years on the DU staff right after I graduated as a leadership consultant and then in various growth roles, mainly to do with expansion. Left for about 3 years to do some alumni engagement work and has made my way back last October. So excited to be back. I've really enjoyed being back on staff, working with chapters when we think about growth strategy, recruitment training, and really seeing chapters be successful as they're trying to continue to grow on their campus and within the DU organization. Joined with me is the rest of my growth team, Trey McDonald, leadership consultant from our Miami chapter, Nam Vu, leadership consultant from our James Madison chapter, and Axel Hoagie, a leadership consultant from our Arlington chapter. They will be monitoring the chat. So if you have questions, feel free to throw those in the chat. The three of them will be monitoring that to answer questions that you all may have or make sure that I'm stopping and answering those questions along the way. Don't feel like you need to put in those questions at the very end. Feel free to put those in anytime throughout. There obviously will be a point at the end of the session where we will have opportunity for some Q&A. But if there are questions, feel free to ask those along the way, and that my team there will go ahead and answer those if they can. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I want to maximize our time. I appreciate those folks on the East Coast where it's 8 p.m. and obviously our West Coast friends where I'm at, where it's 5 p.m. And I want to make sure we get through this in a really effective and efficient manner. So we'll go ahead and jump right in with our session here. So, what we'll be going over are 10 tactics that I think are most important when we're taking over the role of VP of recruitment that are going to lead to a higher likelihood of successful recruitment and for the most part are very easily implemented. And I think guys who have worked with me before or I've had recent phone calls with, and I see a lot of names that either I've spoken to within the course of the last month. I've had some calls this week so far. I have some calls set up. You're going to see a lot of crossover in our conversations and what you hear here tonight. And so I think it's really important that we're continuing to hone in on how are we thinking about these 10 ways in which we can implement them within our chapter recruitment. So you'll see here, we'll go one by one. Tactic one being 365 recruitment, two being setting goals, three being the utilization of the recruitment team, four being clear roles and responsibilities, five being outreach, outreach, outreach. Six is being consistent. Seven is that informal and formal engagement. Eight, asking the right questions and know what the chapter offers. Nine, intentional follow-up. And 10 being having fun and enjoy the process. And so we'll dive a little bit deeper into each of those 10 here over the course of the next 45 minutes to an hour to really think about what does that mean? And then how can we translate that into our chapter recruitment this spring? Ultimately, I always view this as great recruitment is creating an environment where potential members feel like they belong before they even join. And in recent research data that we're receiving, through the NIC and through some other research that has been happening, belonging is still the number one reason men are joining fraternities on our campus. And so if we are able to create an environment and create a recruitment process where our members, our potential members are feeling as though they found a community and a space of belonging within DU on their campus before they even join, then we've done our job. And the likelihood that we are going to recruit both the quality and quantity of men that we want on our campuses is going to be high. And so I think these 10 tactics that we'll talk about provide us a great opportunity to create that feeling of belonging as we're moving forward. I'm sure there's chapters on this call and guys on this call that are looking at these tactics and saying, yep, like we're already implementing these. We've seen these. We've set some good foundation there. And so really looking forward to continuing to talk about those. Obviously, as we're going through each one, if you have any, hey, yeah, we do this at my chapter. Here's how that looks. Feel free to throw that in the chat. So I want this to also be an idea sharing space for guys. And so if you have some thoughts there about each of the tactics or each of the ways that you've seen them be successful, feel free to throw those in the chat as well. And obviously, my team will be able to monitor that and respond accordingly. So let's jump in to tactic number one. If you have ever had a phone call with me, if you have been on an Amplify DU webinar, if you have been to an educational program session, you definitely know this was number one and something I will talk about and can talk about for hours. And it's this idea of 365 recruitment. And it's really important to understand that recruitment is not just 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a week and a half of IFC primary or formal recruitment, and then that's it. 365 recruitment is the way in which we need to think about how we are recruiting men into our organization on a yearly basis. This doesn't mean that we are having 5 different initiations or 3 different new member classes or that we're always extending bids every single day. What this means is that we need to think about this question that you see here on the screen, which is what am I doing today to help the chapter be successful with recruitment? And in your roles on a recruitment committee, as the VP of recruitment, maybe you're an advisor to recruitment, you serve on the alumni board, thinking about what you need to do every day to push the needle forward when it comes to recruitment. And clearly, there's going to be more depending on the season. Right now, we're in that heightened season because we're getting into the spring semester. So there's going to be a lot more that you need to do every day in order to push that forward when it comes to that. Later on in the semester, it might be a little bit less, right? We've gotten through our bid day, we have our new member class, but we still need to think about what that looks like. And so this is something that's incredibly important, something that if your chapter is not already implemented 365 recruitment, start having those conversations, reach out to myself, reach out to a growth team member so we can talk about what that looks like. Ultimately, what that looks like is we are constantly thinking about how we're reaching out to potential new members. Are we adding potential new members to our names list? What are we doing to enhance our social media presence that is going to help an individual understand what the chapter looks like and what they can expect? Are we talking to alumni around alumni referrals? Are we working with IFC to think about how can we continue to have a bigger presence on campus? Are we tabling on campus to continue to find guys, right? It's really thinking about what are we doing outside of that primary and formal time. Because ultimately, if we want to build relationship and we want to build belonging, we need to do that over the course of multiple weeks and months rather than just 2 or 3 weeks, right? And I think that's really important because relationships are built over time, not just in a way that makes for, a 2 hour session during an event that we have during primary formal recruitment. And so I always equate this, and again, if you've seen or been on a webinar with me or in an educational program, I equate this to college football recruiting minus the NIL now. And I've come, I went to school at Oregon, right? So, NIL, I wish we could provide $6 million deals or whatever the case is. But really, the foundation of that is they are building, and coaches and recruiters are building relationships for years in order to get somebody interested in their program, right? They're building that belonging, they're building that connection, they're building that genuine, authentic relationship. And that is what ultimately, on top of all the other things that a program has to offer, is ultimately leading to that individual feeling as though that is the place they want to be and that is where they want to spend their time as an athlete. We can learn a lot from that within the recruitment space for fraternities. I've seen chapters who do this very, very well. They take that time to really build and develop those relationships. and they feel more comfortable and confident in the men that they have and the interest that they have going into recruitment, during recruitment, post recruitment, because they're always thinking about what they're doing and what they can do every single day to push that needle forward to be successful in that process. So, encourage that if your chapter is doing this, feel free to share how that looks for you in the chat. And again, as we have some of our coaching calls, or if you're curious about what that actually looks like and how we can implement that within your specific chapter, reach out to the growth team. We'll have some contact information for you. We'll throw that in the chat here by the end, and we'd be happy to discuss what that looks like for us. But that's tactic number one. We have to make sure that we are constantly recruiting, constantly building relationships, constantly having engagement opportunities. And there's something that we're doing every single day that's pushing us to be successful when it comes to recruitment, whether that's spring recruitment, summer recruitment, fall recruitment. Tactic number two is setting goals. And I think this is something that I will talk with new VPs about all the time, is that we have to have clear understanding on what our recruitment goals are, what our names list goals are, what our bid extension goals are, what our bid acceptance goals are, what our engagement goals are in terms of how many times are we engaging potential new members, how are we allowing potential new members to come to events, what type of events does that look like? And so as you all come into this position, and as we think about the spring semester specifically, really thinking about what are your goals as a chapter when it comes to recruitment. And obviously, last semester, we sent out those mid-year membership health updates and IHQ recruitment goals. And so those are really those minimum expectations that we're looking for from an IHQ standpoint as we go into the spring, but also gives you a snapshot on where your chapter's at. Is our membership at a place where it needs to grow? And so our goals need to be higher than what it is. Do we have a lot of juniors and seniors that are going to graduate? And so our goals need to adjust because of that, right? And we have to be very clear in what that looks like because our members need to know what our goals are. And then obviously as VPs, as advisors, as alumni, as recruitment committee members, we need to know what we are going towards. What are the things that we need to think about, right? We need to set, hey, okay, if we want 10 guys to join this spring, what does that mean in terms of how many guys need to be on our names list? How many bids do we need to have extended? How many conversations do we need to have? How many different pipelines and areas do we need to dive into and look and go into so that we can find the number of guys that we need? Because the more guys that we have on our names list, the higher likelihood that we're going to find the quality and quantity of men that we're looking for. And so I break it down this way when I'm talking to VPs, and there's a couple of you because I see the names. Actually, they just heard this today or yesterday or earlier this week, and you'll hear it next week if you have a meeting with me. You really have to break it down like this. So if my goal, and I'll just use 10 as kind of an example because it's easy math. If your goal as a chapter this semester is to recruit and bring in 10 associate members, and that's by the end of bid day and by the time that you're done with recruitment, you want 10 guys, you essentially double everything from there in order to really set the minimum goal. So what does that mean? So if I want 10 guys, that means I'm going to have to extend anywhere between 20 and 25 bids in order to get that 10 or have the likelihood that I'm going to get to that number. From there, I need probably anywhere between 40 and 50 guys who have expressed some sort of interest, and there's some good mutual interest within the fraternity, right? So they have come to multiple events. They've kind of checked our criteria boxes. There is that interest that this guy could potentially receive a bid into the organization. From there, we then need to have about 100 to 125 guys just on our names list. So what does that mean? That means just guys that we know, whether that's from social media, whether that's from an interest form, whether that's from an alumni referral, whether that's from an IFC list, that's from a member referral, whatever the case is, they are just on our list of individuals that we could potentially reach out to. And so those numbers are just a bare minimum. And I think it's really important for individuals coming into this position understand those goals and understand that math, because there's a lot of times I will work with chapters and I will work with VPs who say, hey, our goal number is 10. We feel like we're in a really good spot and we have 30 guys on our names list. Well, that's a huge red flag for me because I don't feel confident enough that they're going to find those 10 individuals out of just 30 on their names list. I've had other chapters who have come to me and say, hey, our goal is 10, our goal is 15, and we have 150 guys are on our names list. That's a lot better, right? We can do the math. It's going to provide a higher or a greater likelihood. Or, we want 7 guys to accept bids, but we only extended 9, right? Well, that's going to be tough to get that high of a acceptance rate if our goal is to get 7. And so I think that will allow for you, and this is easily implemented, it allows for you to set the correct goals and really talk about it with your committee, with your executive board, with your advisors, with your alumni on really saying, what is our goal and what do we need to be at and how are we going to get there? And so when you have your weekly recruitment meetings and committee meetings, you can say, what's the status of our goal? Where are we at? Where are we behind? What do we need to do to maybe increase our names list? Do we have enough guys who are interested? Do we have enough guys that we could potentially extend bids to? If not, what do we need to do to ensure that that number is getting higher? Do we need to set up a coaching call with the growth team? Do we need to find different avenues of guys that we're talking to? Do we need to follow up with a couple guys that maybe showed up to a couple events and then we haven't seen them in a while, but they've kind of stayed close enough in interest? What does that look like? What do we need to do? And we need to set those goals. And so if you haven't done so already, this is something that needs to happen by the end of the week, right? I think get on those calls, start talking to your committee, start looking at where the membership is at, start talking to your advisors. What do we need to do to set the correct goals so that we can continue to grow our membership and build our chapters in the right way? Tactic number 3 is the utilization of a recruitment team. And I think the biggest question that you need to be asking yourself today is, who is my team that is going to help me make recruitment a success? Now, you'll hear it from me and you'll hear it from our growth team. Recruitment is a chapter-wide effort, but there has to be a specific team and a very intentional team that's going to really help you in getting the work done that you need to get done, right? And so when we think about the utilization of a team, what we need to be able to do, and get some background noise, I just want to make sure if anyone is not on mute, if you can mute yourself, that would be much appreciated. But what we need to do is think about who is on our team and how are we utilizing them in the correct way, right? So let's say I have a team of 5 that's including myself. So I have 4 recruitment chairs or assistants to the VP of recruitment. Everyone needs to have very specific and clear responsibilities on what they need to do. Maybe I have a guy who's in charge of our social media. So he works closely with our social media chair on ensuring that we're getting social media updated. We're getting our recruitment video out. We're getting the bio updated so that there is an easy way for individuals to express interest. Great. Maybe we have our logistics guy. That's the one who is ensuring that we've got everything we need to IFC for the recruitment calendar. They've got everything we need in terms of reserving rooms and space on campus. If there's going to be food at an event, making sure that we've got that food ordered. Then maybe there's our guys who are managing our names list, right? And they're saying, okay, every single week we have an updated names list. We know where guys are at. We know when we last spoke to them. The notes are updated, all of those pieces. And so recruitment is a big task and it doesn't just fall on you as the VP. And so you being able to utilize your recruitment team is super important. If you don't have your recruitment team today, this is a great thing to start working on. This is something that needs to be established by the end of the week. Who are those guys that you can tap into? I was just talking to a chapter earlier this week and I said, look, we need to create your recruitment team by Monday, by the end of the week. And you need to find the guys who are committed to ensuring that I can make recruitment successful. There's a lot of guys who might be good on a recruitment team, but when they know the work that gets put into there, and we got to be honest with them about the work that it takes to be on a recruitment team, maybe they're better suited to just be kind of a recruitment support person, a part of the chapter, right? We need to make sure we have those individuals who are going to do the work as you delegate it in order to be successful. So if you don't have your recruitment team, get that established ASAP, get weekly recruitment meetings established. If you have advisors and alumni that you can invite to those meetings that are a really good source of knowledge, ensure that they're part of those meetings or at least one every other week, right? But this is something that's incredibly important because I've seen a lot of VPs get burned out if they don't have a recruitment team or they have a recruitment team and they don't utilize it in the right way. When I was an undergrad as the VP of recruitment, that was the first role I served in. I had 4 recruitment chairs underneath me. We met weekly, Each one of them was responsible for a list of anywhere between 50 and 75 potential new members that we had. I was responsible for mine. I had a guy who was responsible for social media. I had another one who was responsible for logistics. And then we met again every single week and we talked through what does that look like? What are your items over the course of the next week so we can hold each other accountable to that. And that fall, our first fall that we did that, we recruited 20 guys, and I gave a lot of credit to my team because they were able to help me with allowing for me to delegate that work, keeping those relationships, keeping me accountable, me keeping them accountable, and being successful in reaching our goals. And so, again, very important. It's easy to implement if you haven't done so already. If you have and you have any best practices, or maybe you were on the recruitment committee, please feel free to share those. Trey, Nam, or Axel, if you've seen any best practices on how recruitment teams have been utilized, please share those as well. So that's tactic number 3 for us. Tactic number 4 is clear roles and responsibilities. We need to establish these. Essentially, the question you need to be asking yourself is what is everyone's job? And when I say everyone, I legit mean everyone within the chapter. So, what is your job as the VP of recruitment? That's very clear. You know what you need to do. What is everyone's job on the recruitment committee? That's very clear. And they have certain responsibilities. And again, if you've been on a webinar with me or you've had a coaching call or you've been in an educational program, you know I will always say the way in which we can get members more engaged is if we give them clear roles and responsibilities and what they need to do, right? And that's going to look different depending on the person, but they need to understand how can they best benefit or how can they best put the work in to benefit the chapter when it comes to recruitment. And so we know our members best. And so we know the guys that are going to go out there and talk to anyone and get them just excited to come to an event. And then we also know the guys who are really good at who maybe shy away from being extroverted or are really good at holding one-on-one conversations. And so we need to make sure that they clearly understand, hey, we need you to go out and bring guys to the event. And then you as somebody who's great at one-on-one conversations, I need you to really engage guys at the event, right? We have other guys who are super into social media. Hey, I need you to be posting all the time. Post on the community pages on Snapchat. Get these shared on Instagram. Do what you need to do to ensure that we're really having the most outreach to individuals. We have some guys who can sit there and table like nobody's business, right? I love to table. I love to talk to people. I love to pull people in. Hey, I need you to be our tabling expert, right? I need you to go table for us at this IFC Meet the Greeks event and get as many numbers and names and meet as many people as possible. Again, if we just go out there as the VPs of recruitment, as the recruitment committee, and say, hey guys, it's everyone's job to recruit. And if everyone does that, then we're going to be successful in recruitment. It just doesn't work. And we've seen that. But if we are very clear in what each individual or what groups of individuals can do and should be doing, it's going to work a lot better. I was just on a call earlier today where I was talking to a chapter that said, hey, by Monday, when you have your next chapter meeting, clearly lay out who should be responsible for what, then address concerns, address questions, have conversation about that. But you know your members and you know where guys can fit in and what role they can play within recruitment instead of just saying, hey guys, everyone needs to do this. And if we all put in 10% towards recruitment, then 100% of recruitment is going to get done and we're going to be successful. Again, it just doesn't work. And as a new person in this role, or maybe somebody who's new to the recruitment committee, we need to understand that and we need to have those conversations with guys on clearly identifying and defining what those roles and responsibilities are. And for some guys, and I say this all the time, for some guys, I just look at them and say, I just need you to show up to the event and engage potential new members. For other guys, it's going to be a little bit more. So it's going to vary depending on the member, and that's okay. They just need to know exactly what that role and responsibility is. So that's tactic number 4. Tactic number 5, and this should be no surprise to anyone, is outreach, outreach, outreach. Like you saw in tactic number 2, everything's a numbers game, and the only way that PNMs are going to know about Delta Upsilon for the most part is if we are doing the outreach ourselves. And so the questions you should be asking, how many PNMs have I reached out to? Is that enough? Have I tapped into all the different pipelines or opportunities that I can, right? Have I done outreach in our Snapchat community pages. And I say Snapchat multiple times because I was on a call right before this with a chapter and we talked about that. We've seen some success with other chapters doing that. Have I reached out to every single person on this list I received from IFC, right? Is that enough? What more can I do to do that outreach? Have I reached out to see what other referrals are out there? Have I talked to my friends that are in other organizations, specifically my friends that might be in sororities who might know some unaffiliated men who I can reach out to or invite to events, right? We have to have the mindset that PNMs are not going to come knocking on our door. We need to be the ones, and right, we're the ones recruiting them, and we need to be proactive in that process. And so we need to outreach as much as possible. It's all a numbers game. You're going to get a lot of rejection, very honest, very transparent. You're going to be a professional at rejection. You're going to be able to put that on your resume. I like to joke that you're a professional at being rejected because, again, that just is the way that recruitment goes. But ultimately, if I get rejected enough times, I'm also going to get a lot of yeses, right? I'm also going to get a lot of guys who are interested, and I'm ultimately going to have the ability to be in a spot where I say, hey, my goals are attainable, my goals are reachable. And for the most part, going to say, yes, I hit my recruitment goals because I just started outreaching as much as possible. And with this one, just because you might be on break still, just because you're not back on campus, if we think about the 365 recruitment mindset, doesn't mean you can't start outreaching today. Doesn't mean you can't start sending those Instagram DMs. Doesn't mean you can't start getting those interest forms out on social media or on Snapchat. Doesn't mean you can start working on a no bid list that your chapter might have from a previous semester. Doesn't mean that you can't start having Zoom one-on-one meetings, right? We do that with expansion. We've had virtual recruitment. We've seen some chapters be successful in that themselves. So that outreach doesn't have to wait until we're on campus. That can start today and that should start today. And it needs to be consistent. You need to be persistent in it. And you just need to continue to do as much outreach as possible. And again, think about how many PNMs have I reached out to? Is that enough? And if not, what do I need to do to make sure we're reaching out to more? Tactic number six, and I just mentioned it, we have to be consistent. Have I made sure that I'm keeping consistent communication with PNMs, members, alumni, advisors, all the players and stakeholders when it comes to recruitment? Consistency is incredibly key. The amount of times that I've worked with a chapter who have said, hey, we're just not getting the response that we want from individuals who we reach out to, and in follow up or digging more into that conversation, understanding that they only sent one message, right? Or they only sent a message to half the list. And because they didn't get the response that maybe they were hoping for or looking for, they didn't reach out to the other half because that half wasn't interested. So I'm not going to reach out to the other half. People are busy, right? And here's the way I think about it. People are busy, and so if I'm not consistently following up with folks or having good communication, then they're going to be lost in doing something else. They're not going to really keep that front of mind. They're going to be worried about class or family stuff or other organizations, right? I that's myself, right? And so we need to, as recruitment folks, be consistent in that communication, right? We need to remind a PNM of every event. We need to ask them, hey, here, or we need to let them know, here's the event. Are you going to be there? Hey, if not, no worries. Here's our next event. Or are you free tomorrow to go grab lunch, go to the gym, go to the library, whatever the case is. We also need to be consistent in our communication with members. Hey, we have this event coming up. Here are the expectations. Here's how many PNMs we're expecting. Here's what we are hoping to gain out of this event. Um, Even to the point of being consistent with your alumni or advisors, right? Here's our update with recruitment. Here's where maybe I'm having struggles with or concerns or questions, right? How are we communicating that in a consistent way so you're feeling like you are progressing in the correct manner with recruitment? The amount of times I've also seen chapters not be consistent and it loses certain guys who might have been interested, right? There's PNMs who say, hey, yeah, I was super interested in DU. I let them know that, and then the communication died off, and then I got interested in somewhere else. I don't blame that PNM, right? I don't blame that if the chapter doesn't consistently communicate with me, that PNM is going to go somewhere else to a place that is consistently communicating with them. So we have to be consistent in that communication. We have to be consistent in that outreach, in that 365 mindset. We have to be consistent in how we're meeting with our recruitment committee and how we're updating our names list. That's key to the entire thing because the consistency also allows for you to see where you might be falling short on certain pieces, where you might have questions, where there might be concerns. And then as the VP allow for you to follow up with the right people. Do I need to follow up with IFC? Do I need to follow up with my advisor? Do I need to follow up with the growth team? Do I need to follow up with my recruitment committee? Do I need to follow up with the PNM? And being consistent in that process allows for you to see a lot more of those things a lot easier. Tactic number seven is this idea of informal and formal engagement. And again, I say this a lot. If you've been on a or if you've had a previous conversation with me, the question I need to be asking myself, or you need to be asking yourself, is the chapter engaging with potential new members both during formal recruitment events? So I would put that as those 2 week events that we put on social media on a calendar and with what I call informal events. And the informal events are the ad hoc dinners, lunches, gym workouts, basketball runs, football runs, video game nights, Monday night football, college football playoff. Excuse me. Are we doing both? Are we engaging with PNMs in both ways? Because that is the way we build the best relationship and build the best idea of belonging and allow for a PNM to see truly who the chapter is, right? I'm always a believer that it is really hard for a potential new member to build a good relationship with the chapter over the course of a week and a half, 2 week formal recruitment process. It's just as difficult, especially if they're going and checking out other fraternities. It's hard for me to really get to know somebody at a Wing Wednesday event and maybe they showed up for an hour because they had to go somewhere else, right? It's a lot easier for me to engage with them at the formal event and then the next day go get lunch with them and that night invite them over to play video games, right? And so that gives me more time in different settings to build a relationship, to create community, to create belonging that's going to allow for that individual to feel as though Delta Upsilon is the right place for me. And then also what happens is it gives me the opportunity to see that individual in different settings, address different questions and maybe concerns they have in different settings. And it doesn't feel so stuffy because I'm able to over lunch or at the gym talk about concerns about time management or finances, or my parents aren't quite sure about this. Where at a formal event, it might be a great opportunity for that individual to get to meet a lot of the chapter, right? And so it gives just us more opportunity and leverage and relationship building that we just don't get if we're just focusing on formal engagement or just focusing on what I call informal engagement. There needs to be a combination of both. Again, I know chapters who do this really well. And so if you're a chapter who feels like you do this really well, or if the consultants, you have any ideas or what you've seen worked really well, throw those in the chat because I love to have those conversations and really think about and see what chapters are doing to engage both in the formal setting and in the informal setting. Number eight is asking the right questions and know what the chapter offers. So, what questions are being asked to better get to know PNMs? And does the chapter know what we have to offer that might get PNMs excited to join? So, this is kind of a two-parter, right? I have to ask the right questions. And a lot of you probably know what those questions are, right? We know what the typical questions are when they come to an event. Hey, what's your name? Where are you from? What's your major? Why are you interested in fraternity? Right? Like those are fine questions. It gets to know the person at a base level, but we also have to dig a little bit deeper, right? We have to ask those questions. Hey, what are you looking for in an organization? What do you hope to gain out of a fraternity, right? What are your thoughts about maybe leadership or service or community, right? What are some of the ways you think that a fraternity, in this case DU, can help you grow as an individual? Right. And now we can get a better picture of that individual. Are they in it for the right reasons or are they in it for the wrong reasons? And then we're able to relate to them a little bit more. We're able to address some of those things. And if we're asking the right questions, we then ultimately know what we as a chapter can talk about and offer that's going to get that PNM to be excited. So what do I mean by that? So if I'm recruiting Trey, And I'm asking the right questions. Hey, Trey, where are you from, right? What brought you to the University of Oregon, the University of Miami, right? What are ways in which you think a fraternity can help you grow as an individual over the course of the next 3 to 4 years, right? What are some things you were involved with in high school? And why did those excite you? And are you involved with anything else here on campus? Great. Like, why'd you get involved in that way? So now I am processing all this information. And let's say Trey's talking about he was super involved with Habitat for Humanity and he's involved with Club Lacrosse. And let's say he also wants to get into the business school and he's working his way to apply and then get into the business school next year. Perfect. All right, Trey. Well, let me talk to you about first all the service work we do as a chapter, right? We have, on average 15 hours of community service. Here's the things that we partner with. We also have this really cool philanthropy and service project called the Global Service Initiative that might interest you. So cool, right? I'm connecting with Trey's interest in service and philanthropy with what DU has to offer as a chapter. Then we're talking about Club Lacrosse. Awesome. I actually have two other guys who are on Club Lacrosse. You probably know them, right? It might be why you're here, but we also love other sports, right? We love to just hang out and play basketball or go to the gym or throw the football around or watch, the NBA playoffs or hockey or whatever the case may be, right? So now I'm connecting him on that level. I've listened to what his interests are and we're talking a little bit more. And then obviously the third piece there would be business. Great. We actually have, 10 guys are in the business school. They've been through this process before. We've got a couple other potential new members who are going through the same thing. We've got a couple alumni that we are super close with that come back to the chapter or that we can easily connect with you that are very successful in the business field, right? So now I'm then connecting on that business aspect there as well. And so what I did was I asked the right questions to gain that information. I knew what the chapter had to offer Trey, and I tailored my response and tailored really my conversation to what's going to interest Trey the most. I always say we have to ask questions and listen first, and then be able to respond, and that's going to make us more successful when we're recruiting individuals. Because we could go on about all the things Delta Upsilon has to offer, but if that's not of interest to the person I'm talking to, then I've really wasted my time. Where if I'm talking to somebody and I'm allowing for them to respond to me, I'm now able to take what their interest is, why they're here, why they're showing up, why they want to join a fraternity, and talk about how we as an organization and as a chapter on our specific campus are able to help them address or maybe enhance their experience based off what their interests are. So really big, kind of again, easily implemented, super successful, must have tactic that if you don't or have questions about what kind of questions should I be asking or what do I know that my chapter offers or doesn't offer, talk to your alums, talk to your advisors, talk to your chapter, talk to us as the growth team. We'd be able to help you out or at least just start creating what that looks like as a chapter and as a recruitment team. Number nine is intentional follow-up. And I think a lot of chapters fall short on this in how they follow up, how they're intentional, because they don't want to be awkward. They don't want to put pressure on a guy. They don't want the guy to feel like there's pressure there. But there's way to be really intentional about follow-up and really understanding that that's an important part of the process. And one way to do that is to have scaling questions. And again, this is one of my favorite things to do when I'm recruiting somebody. I'll take a step back and say a lot of times when I'm in conversations or coaching calls with vice presidents of recruitments or recruitment committees, what will happen is I'll ask, hey, what does your interest look like? You're talking about, you've got a lot of good interest. What does that actually look like? How many guys on that list that you told me about would are at a level in which they would join DU today, or you think they're going to join DU? You have a pretty high likelihood. And a lot of the times it's like, oh, I'm fairly confident, maybe five guys, six guys, seven guys. And the reality is we can feel interest and we think we know interest, but sometimes we just need to ask somebody, hey, how interested are you in potentially joining now that we've had the opportunity to connect? You've met brothers, we've addressed some concerns, you've been around the chapter. And so something that I encourage every chapter to do, every VP to do, every recruitment committee member to do is scale individuals that you are talking to that you are recruiting to really gain their interest. And so the way in which we frame the question is here on the screen. You can frame it. Here's how I frame it. I'd say I'll use Trey again as the example. Trey, on a scale of 1 to 10, one being thanks, Hayden, for engaging with me and allowing for me to learn more about DU, but never talk to me again. 10 being if I had the opportunity right now to join Delta Upsilon at Miami, I would say yes. Where on that scale do you think you would be? Right. And now it gives Trey the opportunity to share with me, I never want to talk to you again, or I want to join DU today. And Trey's going to say, hey, I'm at an 8. Great, Trey. I love to hear it. What is preventing you from being at a 9 or a 10? Now Trey's able to say, my parents are still kind of iffy. I'm not too sure about the time commitment. I don't want my academics to slip. Great. Now let's address those concerns and those things that you might want or need some more conversation around, right? Sometimes, maybe I thought Trey was super interested and he says, hey, I'm at like a 4 or a 5. I just don't know if fraternity is really for me. Great. I appreciate the honesty. If there's a way that we can get you higher, that, let's talk about that. But if that's really where you're at, that's totally fine. Like we can move on and, fraternity's not for everyone. And that really is okay. Totally fine. There has been times where I've asked this question and somebody says, I'm at an 8. I go, why are you not, what's preventing you from being at a 9 or a 10? They think about it. They go, I don't really know. So I guess I'm at a 10. Boom. Perfect. Like that person is in. If we're at a process where I can give him a bid right there, I'm going to give him a bid. There's a lot of guys that I've recruited who say, I'm at a 10. Perfect. Here's a bid. Right. And so now I know a lot more confidently where somebody's interest lies rather than guessing based off conversation or feeling or maybe something that he said. And it allows for me to have very intentional follow up on concerns or questions that individual might have. So a lot of the times we'll do this twofold, right? I'll ask them maybe in the first couple interactions, hey, we've interacted, you've learned a little bit more about DU, where's your interest at? A lot of the times guys will be in the 7 to 8 range. And then we'll have more interactions. And then I'll ask again, hey, you've had some more interactions. I know you're at a 7 last time I asked this question. Where are you at now? For the most part, you would hope that that number rises. And so it's showing, okay, cool. He was interested to begin with. We continue to engage with him. He's now at a higher interest level. We're able to address some questions, and now I'm feeling pretty confident that he's going to say yes if and when he receives this bid that we're about to give him. So highly encourage every chapter to do this, highly encourage those conversations to happen. It's not an awkward conversation. It's very straightforward and break the ice, and just allowing for you to feel more confident in what that interest level is. And again, if you have any questions about kind of how that intentional follow-up works, how that scaling works, reach out to the growth team and be happy to walk you through what that looks like. And number 10, and I truly, truly believe this, have fun, enjoy the process. The process is a lot. I understand it, but just enjoy it. Ultimately, ask yourself, is the chapter enjoying recruitment? How are we providing a fun environment? Because if we're enjoying recruitment as a chapter, if we're having fun, if we feel like we belong and we're showing that to the potential new members, they're going to feel that. There have been times I've worked with chapters or PNMs or I've spoken to them and they just said, it just doesn't look like the chapter's having fun. It doesn't look like the chapter enjoys each other, right? And there's been other times where it's like, I joined because the chapter really seemed like they enjoyed each other and I wanted to be a part of that. And so let's make sure that we're focusing on that. Take pauses at times. When I was the VP of recruitment, I remember I wanted to do an event every single day for 2 weeks. I was just like, let's just do it, right? And by day 3, my recruitment committee looked at me and said, Hayden, based off the feedback we're getting and what we're seeing from the chapter, guys just aren't having fun. They're getting already burnt out, and we're only 3 days in. And so we switched the process up a little bit. We took some events and we took them off the calendar. We moved some things around so the guys felt like they were having fun and they weren't getting burnt out. And we were also just enjoying the process. We were enjoying the fact that we were getting guys who were interested, that we were meeting new people, that we were getting guys that were interested in another fraternity. It didn't work out there, and so they came to us. We enjoyed even kind of the rough times together because we were a tight-knit recruitment committee. We just enjoyed the entire process there, and I truly believe it starts from the top down. If my recruitment committee is enjoying the process and they're having fun, it can really resonate with the rest of the chapter. So those are the 10 tactics. I think again, easily implemented things that I'm sure for a lot of chapters, you might say, hey, yeah, we're implementing 4 or 5 of these. Maybe you're looking at it and saying, hey, we only have really 2 or 3, or maybe some of you are saying, yeah, we actually do probably 8, 9, or 10 of these. And so I challenge you to really take this in and really think about, are we implementing these? Have these be implemented? If not, how can we start doing that ASAP as soon as possible? If we are implementing these, are we implementing them in the way that we need to? Or do we need to change it up a little bit? Do we need to dissect and think about what that looks like? Right. But I think that these 10, in all my conversations and all the coaching I've done, these are the ones that typically stand out to me that we can implement them. Chapters can latch onto them. They're easy action items and they lead to a greater likelihood of success when it comes to recruitment. And as individuals who are coming into the position, I think are great 10 tactics to think about and really process and dive into how are we implementing these within our chapter or within my chapter. Other additional resources that I love to share on the DU website under recruitment programming, we have all our previous Amplify DU webinars. We have our recruitment marketing toolkit, which I know chapters use. We also have recruitment resources under the chapter officer resources page. So I definitely encourage you to check those out. And then Fired Up, which is a company that helps with recruitment and growth within just the Fraternity and Sorority Life space, has free resources. They're downloadable resources, tools, and guides, totally free to access. And so I highly encourage you to check out those resources as well. So with that, I will take a moment to see what questions might be there or be out there. Feel free if you want to come off mute to ask your question if you don't throw them in the chat. So I'll give guys a few minutes to see if there's any questions, and you feel free to throw them in the chat or come off mute and ask those. All right. Seeing none, not a problem whatsoever. I appreciate the consultants on putting in some helpful tips there with the pieces. Oh, here we go. What's the best way to get the whole chapter engaged during rush events in Nebraska? We do summer recruitment, and usually some dudes don't show up. Yeah, this is a great question. I think it goes back to understanding your question, your chapter, understanding the roles and responsibilities. I think really first and foremost, and transparently, and just being very open and honest, it is very hard sometimes to get everyone 100% of a chapter super engaged with recruitment. I know at Nebraska that's probably even a little bit more difficult just because of the size of the chapter. But this is probably the most common question or conversation I have is like, how do I get guys engaged? A lot of it is helping them understand why it's important they're supposed to be there, what they can do to help out with recruitment, and making those recruitment events fun and engaging for everyone involved. But then ultimately, I think the next step is if people aren't showing up, I have to focus on the ones that are there, the ones that are being engaged, and then address some of those pieces later. And so some of that might mean I'm going to have some intentional follow-up. I'm going to allow for there to be some conversations with certain individuals, right? But also know that I have to be very clear in why it's important that folks are there, right? I think if we're thinking about summer recruitment for Nebraska or for summer groups that are really heavy on summer recruitment, even making sure that if we know a lot of guys are in, Kansas City or Chicago or somewhere else, maybe we do an event specifically there. Maybe we can invite some alums. So it's getting them engaged in that way, especially if they're not going to come back to campus. But again, it's really about diving into how are we clearly communicating roles, responsibilities, expectations to chapter members and doing that ahead of time instead of just saying, hey, we have this event, show up because it's recruitment. Even if you told me that, I'd have a hard time being like, well, why? I don't get it, right? Especially if I'm not somebody who is naturally saying like, well, there's, 50 other guys who can go do it. So why does me showing up matter? So, but again, happy to have further conversations about Nebraska specific stuff. This is our chapter's first time doing spring recruitment in 4 years. We're expecting a smaller class. How do we cater towards recruiting only a handful of PNMs? Yeah. So I think great question there. I know Trey answered, have multiple guys reaching out to guys. Don't do it overbearing, but show them you're interested and offer diversity in membership. Yeah, I think there's also the piece where it's like a lot of that informal stuff. You're building genuine connection there. You don't necessarily have to have these large events, but maybe some more of those smaller events. Dan, I think that that's where I love to hear that it's the first time you're doing spring recruitment in 4 years. I'm a huge advocate that every chapter should be doing recruitment every single semester that they possibly can, even if it is a smaller class. But I think that that's where you just have to have a lot more of those smaller events, but that's going to be a lot more personal. It's going to allow for them to have a lot more connection with one another, build greater connection. Think about ways in which you can have more of those informal opportunities as well. So getting lunches, dinners, going to the gym, studying on top of some of those other events, and as a chapter, just setting those expectations around, hey, it's just going to be a smaller, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be any less successful. We're really going to focus on building the relationships with the guys that are there. Nathan, what are event ideas you all have to keep brothers engaged and excited about Rush rather than seeing it as a chore? Yeah. So one, I think a couple of different ideas right off the bat or thoughts. Number one is ask the members, hey, what do you think are good recruitment events? Give them some opportunity to share feedback or them to share with you what they would like to show up to. Think about throughout the year, what are things that the chapter does that is the most fun or the most engaging. That's something that we always did. It's like when I was in school, we loved to go out and play football. And so we made sure that football was part of it was part of our recruitment events, right? We also loved to do a lot of just like football watch parties or sports watch parties. And so that was another part of our events. And so it allowed for us to think about what are things that just excite the individual members throughout the course of a year. And that's very typical of what the chapter would do. Again, the other piece, and it goes back to, I think it's tactic three, is if we're just saying, hey, show up to these recruitment events because it's recruitment, again, now it feels like a chore instead of me explaining why it's important I'm showing up, why I can push the needle, and how this can really allow for individuals to have fun and bring more guys into the organization. Great questions. Other questions for this evening? All right. Seeing and hearing none. As a reminder, next week is part two. So next Wednesday, same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, we will have part two. So you'll get an email either Monday or Tuesday with that Zoom link. I will also throw my email into the chat and phone number. And so if you have any questions or want to set up a recruitment coaching call, I know there's a handful of you that we already have calls set up or that we have recurring calls. But if you don't have one and want to talk with a growth team member or myself specific to your chapter, please feel free to shoot me an email or shoot me a text. Happy to get that set up within the next week. But looking forward to seeing everyone next Wednesday for part two. I will also send out the recording of this session to everyone, hopefully tomorrow. So be on the lookout for that. And really appreciate everyone's attendance and participation, and looking forward to seeing you all have really successful spring recruitment. So we'll stay on for a little bit longer, but really appreciate everyone. Hope everyone enjoys the rest of their evening. Enjoy the rest of the week. And for anyone who might be going to President's Academy tomorrow or the Emerging Leaders Program, safe travels. You'll be meeting Trey, Nam, and Axel. And so they're excited to meet you, and safe travels to Indiana. So thank you all again. Enjoy the rest of your night, and we'll see you next week.